start this work session, we invited our friends in the museum here to talk to us. Let's go around and identify ourselves for the record. Start with you, Mr. Flynn.
Patrick Floyd.
Dick Traney.
Elvie Gray Jackson.
Tim C. Pete Peterson. Bill Evans.
Amy DeBossi. Julie Ferguson and Townsend. Hi, I'm Julie Decker. I'm the director of the Anchorage Museum.
Good.
And I brought some folks with me.
My name is John Levy. I'm on the board of the museum.
My name is Jim Coleman. I'm also on the board of the museum.
I'm Kirsten Levy. I'm the CFO.
Joe, return the time over to you. Understand you've got a slide presentation?
I have a presentation.
Okay.
Don't mind looking at some images behind you. So first I want to say thank you for the opportunity to share with all of you what's happening at the museum and to answer your questions. We appreciate the forum. And this image is brand new. Took it yesterday with an iPhone because we added the message, welcome, to our facade, and that is in the Dena'ina language, Dena'ina Athabascan language. And this is in anticipation of some of our VIP visitors at the end of the month, 100 foreign diplomats, but also that for the next year we want to welcome every visitor to Anchorage into the museum and to remind locals and visitors alike that we're on Dena'ina land and that this is the place of many people. So in terms of the history of the museum, sorry about the pixelation there, the museum began in 1968. It was founded by Elmer Rasmussen, who was mayor of Anchorage at the time, and he believed that every great city needed a great museum. The museum has always been owned by the municipality of Anchorage, has been built on municipal land since 1968. And the museum began with a borrowed collection. It was a one-room building, and today it has 30,000 objects in its collection, 500,000 historical photos, hundreds of rare books and maps that are now part of the collection that belong to the people of Anchorage and are held by the museum in public trust. So the museum is responsible for the care of those objects into perpetuity, which is a fairly large responsibility. This is the building when it first opened. Again, a small building. Today the museum has 50,000 square feet of exhibition space. It organizes and hosts 20 changing exhibitions each year. It offers 200 public programs each year. It runs classes, camps, tours for toddlers, for K through 12 students, programs for university students, and works with the Anchorage School District to deliver educational programs to 15,000 school children, and with rural school districts to deliver science and cultural programs to locations around the state, and to provide teacher training and informal education. The museum is encyclopedic, which makes it distinct among many museums, which means that its mission is to feature Alaska and the circumpolar north through a variety of disciplines, including art, history, science, and culture. With the 2009 expansion, we added a hands-on science center through a merger with the Imaginarium Discovery Center. We added science to our overall mission. We entered into a long-term agreement with the Smithsonian, which you see here, to house 600 Alaska Native objects in the Smithsonian Arctic Studies Center. Last year, we became an official Smithsonian affiliate, and we have 2 full-time employees of the Smithsonian who work at the museum as part of the center. And this year, we actually also opened the Smithsonian Spark Lab, which is a hands-on experiential space for children to think about and interact with ideas around innovation. The museum is also a center for scholarship and research. Through our archive of historical photos, we have programs to work with conservators around the world on objects and materials. We work with international scholars to study our collection. We work on publications and exhibitions. Last year we had the highest attendance on record for the museum, the highest membership on record, in a year where we produced and not borrowed all of our major exhibitions. So today we don't just import exhibitions, we export them. Our Gyre exhibition opened in Los Angeles this month, and this fall our Arctic Ambitions exhibition travels to the Washington State History Museum in Tacoma. The museum is an important community institution, recognizing centennials, such as the 4 exhibitions we have organized this year to celebrate Anchorage's 100th. We're hosting thousands of people each first Friday. We recognize important historical events for the community, and we work with hundreds of artists and others from throughout the community and around the world. We have programs with Native youth and teens, bringing in Native artists from around the state. We've initiated innovative programs to work with teens and children, including a film school that we deliver to the Anchorage School District, a program involving the computer game Minecraft to be able to bring children into the museum for something they are doing at home. We have Tuesdays on the Lawn each Tuesday with live music. We put live music in our giant slow elevator on first Fridays. We activate every space in the museum. This was a performance where dancers came down our facade year before last. So every Tuesday we open our lawn to the public and have free programming outside, music, food trucks, and almost every Tuesday this summer was a beautiful sunny day. We welcome a lot of people. We think of ourselves as community ambassadors, that a lot of people who come to Alaska don't have a chance to get around the state, and we know that the Anchorage Museum is an important moment to introduce a lot of people to Alaska when they don't have time to see it all. We're the largest cultural institution in the state. We're the most visited cultural institution in the state, most visited indoor attraction actually, so we lose out to the Chugach Mountains every year. We're an ambassador to many, including the King of Norway, who visited last May. We will host the Secretary of State and in about a week, officials of the State Department, 100 foreign diplomats, state senators, and members of the international press. We take our public role very seriously. We're committed to it. We've never offered more programs nor more access to the museum and its collections. The museum at its founding was envisioned as a public-private partnership. And while its staff was originally municipal at its founding, the Anchorage Historical and Fine Arts Commission was appointed in 1968 by the mayor and the assembly. And in 1969, the Anchorage Museum Association was formed, and it was the goal to have that public-private partnership to supplement municipal funding with private funds. So this public-private partnership has grown throughout the museum's almost 50-year history. In 2018, we will celebrate 50 years. Until 2005, the museum's governance was quite complex. The museum was governed under a complicated structure of overlapping boards, and the mayoral administration in 2005 saw obstacles to clear leadership, efficient management, and maximized funding, particularly prior to a planned expansion. So it was Mayor Wirch who began the effort to privatize management of the museum and to consolidate staff and streamline government. And then Mayor Bekich decided to continue on that path that was set forth by Mayor Wirch, his predecessor, and appointed a new board of directors in 2005 to manage the museum, and then worked with former Mayor Rick Mystrom to create an ordinance, which I did pass around, that set up a multi-year long-term agreement to have the Anchorage Museum Association manage the museum, its facility, and its collection. The ordinance was passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly in 2005. And the new management agreement was entered into with the Anchorage Museum Association in 2006. At the time, the museum had 32 municipal employees, almost half of which was security personnel. Knowing that the museum was about to double in size with an expansion, the privatization of management was set up for the municipality to see significant cost savings as staff and costs of maintaining the facility were projected to double by 2008. Today the museum has 68 full-time employees. It contracts out security. It has an $11.5 million operating budget, a $30 million endowment through the Museum Foundation, and has $40 million in capital projects. And the Anchorage Museum Association is responsible for maintaining the facility, including all major maintenance, and for managing all capital projects. So while the municipality's goal in 2005 was to see a 3% cost savings in privatizing management, it has grown to be a very successful model for public-private partnerships, and the savings have exceeded that by 150%. The Anchorage Museum Association has worked well and closely with multiple administrations since then. In terms of financial management, as with all 501c3s, our audit, which is annual by an independent auditor, auditing firm, is public information. The 990 tax filings are public. And they are provided to the municipality, which is reviewed by the Assembly, and they are also public through the IRS. The Assembly did review our audit last week or 2 weeks ago. You can see from this chart where our revenues come from. The municipality is a $4.6 million contribution. The rest of the revenue is raised through admissions, earned revenue, contributions from foundations and individuals, membership, program revenue, and a lot of fundraising from private foundations. And then our endowment does provide some operating funds each year. I think one of the things that's distinct about the AMA contract in comparison to the contracts with the Performing Arts Center is that the Anchorage Museum Association is responsible for major maintenance projects. That is not the responsibility of the cost of the municipality. The other thing that's distinct is that this was envisioned with the ordinance and with the contract to be a long-term contract, multi-year, into perpetuity arrangement between the AMA and the municipality. The Anchorage Museum Association is governed by a board of directors. They're members of the public. The mayor, within the contract, is open to appoint an ex officio member so that there's municipal representation on the board. I will note that that has never been appointed, but certainly can be. Minutes and policies are provided to the municipality through our contract administrator, and those are available to the public upon request, currently through the Muni Contract Administrator through their standard process of accessing public information through the Muni. We have many partnerships and constituents. We have several MOUs with organizations from the Alaska Design Forum to the Cook Historical Society to the Alaska Sports Hall of Fame to the Woodworkers to Alaska Photographic Center. We try to provide the facility to nonprofits to share our infrastructure with the city and its community. We have long-term agreements with the Anchorage School District and others to provide services to organizations. We seek input from our membership and the public in many ways. We solicit input through our website. We conduct polls. We have surveys by email. We have the public serve on project committees. We have iPads in the museum and in the gallery soliciting input. We have professional evaluators come in to look at our exhibitions and our programs. We hire professional research firms from time to time and consultants every 5 years to evaluate how we're serving the public and reaching audiences. We have comment cards, membership surveys, focus groups. I took a slide shot of this yesterday because I was in a meeting where we had just worked with the Creation research firm who polled 600 of our members by phone to see what it is that they want and look for in the museum, what things they want to see more of, breakdown of demographics of who currently visits the museum and what they want to see, what they would like to see changed or not changed. And in September, we start a series of focus groups with the research firm where we'll work with members and non-members in the community to do in-depth evaluation of the museum and what it offers and might offer in the future. I share this because I think my personal story is representative of many people's relationships with the museum. It's my dad over there, by the way.
There's no resemblance.
My parents were public school teachers. My mom taught preschool. My father was an ombudsman, teaches at the university. He was an artist who had a solo show at the Anchorage Museum when I grew up. As with many school children, I went to the museum on field trips. I had my high school prom at the museum. I got married at the museum. I worked there as an intern, and I have a 40-year professional and personal history with the institution. I think that's so similar to many people who grew up in Anchorage, that it's their first introduction to native cultures of Alaska on field trips, or that they have some kind of personal event at the museum that becomes part of their personal history. I've been dedicated to serving this community, and it's my primary interest in doing all things. I love this institution because of what it offers to the community, because of the people that care about it, because of the kids it reaches, because we can represent multiple voices at the museum. And at a time when there's so much interest in the North and the Arctic, I know the important role that it can play in providing an authentic voice for this place and its people. In front of you is our strategic plan, which was adopted last year. Jim Coleman on our board led the strategic planning effort at the board level. But before we began our strategic plan, we interviewed many stakeholders, from members to the public to funders to corporations to other nonprofits in the community to businesses, and asked them about the museum, their experience with it, why they came or why they didn't come, and what a museum might mean to the community. And our plan began there. It was a 9-month process to think about what a museum means in this place and in this community. Also in front of you is a concept plan for our Alaska Gallery. The Alaska Gallery, sorry for the photo, was opened with a 1986 expansion. It was meant to be the survey history of Alaska. When the building opened in 1986 and the exhibit had been planned for years, it really ended before oil had been discovered and before ANCSA and other things. So as you know, the history of our city and our state was affected dramatically by both of those things. So, and some of the language used to describe Native cultures in the exhibition is dated. It's time for a major update. And 15 years ago, the museum and its constituents began planning for a new gallery, a new Alaska gallery. Charrettes were held, groups were interviewed, curatorial work was done. Conservators came to look at the objects, and in July of 2016, the 1,000 objects in this gallery will come out of the space, go into storage, receive conservation work, and then we'll begin installing the new Alaska Gallery, which has gone through a series of processes, but you'll see the most recent iteration in front of you, which is really to think about how we tell the whole story of Alaska, from how important this place is to its people, how our environment affects our lifeways, from Native people to the incredibly diverse community we have today, to World War II and the gold rush, and our historical timeline that defines this place. We spent the last several years working on a historical timeline for the project with many community members. We have a new historical advisory committee that's meeting to evaluate the latest plan starting next month. And we have a team of Indigenous community advisors who are working with us to talk about how we make sure we represent those voices within the exhibition. And we have Aaron Leggett, who's a Dena'ina Athabascan historian who is the lead curator on the project for this phase. We anticipate opening the gallery to the public in 2017. In the year when the project is under construction, we will have the objects stored within the museum in visible storage, so that the objects are not fully off display. The public can come and see the project taking place. They can see conservators working on the objects. They can ask questions about the conservation work being done and about the history of those pieces. And then I think think the Rasmussen history with the museum is an interesting one. I think for Elmer Rasmussen, it was an institution near and dear to his heart because he was the founding mayor when the museum opened. I think Ed Rasmussen almost reluctantly inherited this love, but I grew to love it himself as well. And it's Ed Rasmussen and the Rasmussen Foundation who have committed to making a $24 million gift to see an expansion occur. And the motivation behind it is that as the museum continues to serve the community and needs to celebrate things like the city's centennial, the art collection of the museum is only able to be shown to the public at about 3% of what's in collections and what's in storage. And Ed's personal concern is that some of the collections of Alaskan landscapes will leave the state because people won't want to donate them to a place but cannot exhibit them. So this is anticipated to be about a 25,000 square foot expansion of gallery space to be dedicated to the museum's art collection, so that the city's art collection is on permanent exhibition for the public. It's a private gift, and our conversations with the Sullivan administration were that the city should accept the gift of the building post-construction, similar to the arrangement with the Denina Center, where that was constructed privately and managed privately, and then at the close of that, the city accepted the building. With this expansion, as with the current AMA contract, it's understood that major maintenance of this building and ongoing daily maintenance would be the responsibility of the Museum Association. Right now, this is in a planning stage. There are pre-construction contracts in place to study the feasibility of the building to determine what a gross maximum price might be for the project. And until that's done and until we have the mayor and others sign off on the project with us, we will not enter construction contracts. But I wanted to allow a few minutes for our guests, our board members, to say a few words if they'd like to. John Levy is the chair of our finance committee.
Honorable Chair, distinguished assembly members, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about the Anchorage Museum, which I think is a very exciting success story and one that I'm really happy to discuss. My own personal history, like Julie's, goes back quite a while. When I was about 12 years old, my brother and I, when the museum had just opened up, we volunteered and they put us in the back room stringing Russian trade beads that I hope they weren't selling as authentic. But then after that, I led tours and I started a love of Alaska history. At that time, Alaska history wasn't required in the schools and we didn't know that much about it. And so that sparked a lifelong love and interest in Alaska history. I've been on the board for the last couple of years, and one of the things that I'm most excited about is, one, this opportunity to be part of this process that is going to influence our community for generations to come, not only in terms of telling our story, but thinking of how we want to tell our story, which is it's compelling, as we all know, but also in a way that as people learn differently and absorb information differently, we have an opportunity. We're not stuck with a stodgy 100-year-old institution. We have an opportunity to change things. And that's what all, I think, museums are about going into this next century. And so that's really exciting. The other thing I love about the museum is I've been selling real estate for the last 25 years, and you don't get much more private sector than that. And so I'm always a little dubious about, how efficient or how reactive different institutions can be. And I can tell you that one of the things I'm so impressed about the museum is the staff. They're creative. They'll bring ideas to the board. We'll try something. If it doesn't work, then we'll go on to something else. But they're very reactive and very strategic planning. This I know some people had some concerns about public process and whether there was enough public input. And I can tell you that the board and the staff have just got bent over backwards trying to reach out in the community to see how we can be more relevant to this community. So we're not just some kind of elite institution downtown. And that's why we reached out with the school district, bringing school kids in. It's for many kids, it's the first time they've been in a museum. They do this gala in the fall that's targeted at younger people. We've tried to bring in other voices in talking about our history and to make it relevant for our community. As part of the strategic plan, it was an incredibly rigorous process that Jim can talk to you about in going after our donors and members and other people in the community to see what are they expecting from the community, what are they looking at, and then revising our plan and our mission and our goals accordingly. A really good example for it is that Julie and staff came up with this Nat Geo series, which I don't. Did any of you attend any of those?
It means National Geographic.
Right. It was at the PAC, so we partnered with them, and they were just about sold out every time. It was great. It was really exciting, adventure photography and everything. Well, the bottom line was it really wasn't profitable, so we decided not to do it. So I thought that was a hard decision because people loved it, but it was a good financial decision, and it was responding to the marketplace. So that was something that appealed to me. So I think the museum is a success story. This public-private partnership seems to be working really well. When I read the numbers, it looks like we've saved a lot of money in managing this institution ourselves. And I'm really happy to be part of this institution. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would echo much of what John said. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. But I understand as well there's some concern about how the public is involved in the oversight of the museum, and that might be why we were brought here today. All the members of the board are members of the public. We are not selected by Julie. We are self-governing, and we recruit other members of the public to join the board. And actually, we've improved our recruiting process over the last 2 years under the leadership of another board member, Jim Koskinen, who's not here. But I think it's important to understand we come from different aspects of the community. We are members of the public ourselves. And although Julie runs the museum day-to-day, she really does report to us. We recruited her through an extensive search process that I was part of as well, and we selected her. But we have ultimate power, as any board does, over her decision making. I am not born and raised in Anchorage, Alaska. I've been here about 15 years, and I feel very fortunate to be invited to serve as a member of the public on the board. It has been exceptionally rewarding for me in the few years I've done that. I actually moved to live closer to the museum now. I'm within walking distance. When we have out-of-town visitors here, the museum is always on our list of a place to go. I think its profile has increased tremendously. Its visibility has increased in the community over the last several years, not just because of its value to visitors, but because of some of the programming changes that you see. The things you see, such as the Nat Geo program, partnering with the PAC, performers out on the lawn or on the front of the building. These aren't some crazy avant-garde idea up here in Alaska. This is what's happening with museums worldwide as they examine how to remain relevant in a changing world and how to attract young people. And museums are becoming places of congregation, of meeting, of events, and we're thinking literally outside the walls and how can we become a vibrant member of the community, not simply a space you walk into and look at things. And that's why you see some of this programming happen. It's not unique to our community. This is what's happening in museums worldwide. Visitors tell us they respond to interactive, experiential things more than simply passive looking at art. It's important to have the art. It's important for the art to be available. But that's why you see some of this programming here. It's an exciting time to be part of the museum. I think I've had the opportunity to work with a few other nonprofit boards in town. I've never been involved with an institution that's run this well. We seem to be firing on all cylinders at the moment, and it is a pleasure and an honor to work on a board that's in that situation. If any of you have done similar volunteer work, you know sometimes that's not the case. Thank you again for your time. I'd be happy to entertain any questions publicly or privately afterwards.
Thank you.
Jim's going to have to run out to go back to
About 10
his
minutes.
practice.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Heather Arnett on the board of the museum. I've been here a long time. I was born in Anchorage. Mr. Decker was one of my art teachers at Service High, but we won't go into the details. I'm sorry. Yeah. But I also have a long history with the museum, having been a public school student. Lots of great experiences there, and I've worked in nonprofits in Anchorage for many years. I think one thing that's very exciting about the museum, which both of these gentlemen said a little bit, is that it really has become a world-class institution with wonderful creative exhibits. It's interactive. We really can be proud of what the museum has become. And it also has become a real community center. When you go over there, you see people all ages interacting, having wonderful experiences. And that's really neat to me, that there is a place in Anchorage where lots of people are congregating. And also, I love the museum's approach to outreach and inreach. And during the school year, there are kids coming to the museum every day, school kids coming for tours. They're also thinking about how do we engage in youth in a way that's meaningful to them. And there was there was a project there with Minecraft, a video game, where kids were coming in and were designing a museum, or putting pieces together and relating to each other. There was an event recently where a Native American young man was here and was working with kids, I believe in connection with the Boys and Girls Club, designing their own skateboards. So I just I really appreciate that ongoing connection and thinking about how do we connect with Anchorage, how do we connect with all the different aspects of Anchorage. So thank you for having us.
Yeah. You mean to say, ma'am?
She's here to answer questions.
Okay, good. Well, let's start with questions. Mr. Flynn, it's in your area. We'll start with you.
I was at the museum Monday. I know it pretty well.
Any questions?
I'll pass.
Okay. Elvie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First off, I want to thank everybody for being here. And I'm really glad that we're having this work session, because I've been on the assembly since 2008 and staff longer than that. And I think this is the first time, at least that I can remember, that there's been a museum presentation. And it is a success story. It really is. And I want to thank you, Julie, for the presentation, and also for your service to the citizens of Anchorage and the visitors of Anchorage. And the museum is a wonderful place for events. It really is. And I was also married at the museum, divorced at the courthouse. But it was a beautiful experience for me.
Is your dress over there on display?
No, it's at Sharon. And so, but anyway, I thought I heard you say that you got $4.6 million from the...
Correct.
Actually, it was more than that. They didn't tell you. It's like $4.9 million that we appropriated this year, but you need to talk to the contract administrator, because it's more than 4.6. And the first question I have, and I don't remember what the numbers were from the financial statements, but what's the operating budget fund balance for 2014?
So
I just don't remember.
We have an $11.5 million operating budget. It varies depending on what exhibitions we have, but it's always between $10 and $12 million. We have a policy on our through the financial committee that specifies that we do need to maintain a 4-month operating rainy day fund. So that's our long-term investment fund, so that if something terrible happened with the economy, that we would be able to pay employees and be able to operate for 4 months. So that we do hold that as a fund balance. Typically, we see about a $200,000 surplus in our budgeting.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Steele?
Yes, thank you very much. It's good to focus on the service provided the community by the museum periodically. So thank you. When my kids were younger, we used to go frequently. My kids were Denali kids, so it was just up the block, and they'd have a class there, a mediation class, and then training that all these people did. So it was great during that period of time. But so much has changed. It's a world-class museum at this point in terms of the facility, the displays that you have in it, and it tells a story well. And always proud when there's things on the outside that everybody can see in terms of the ballet, I guess, on the front of the museum, the art, outside art, and my daughter's a dancer, and so she was duly impressed. So anyway, I need to get back. I haven't been in for a while. Last time there was something like kicked up or something, but I need to get back in. So I really appreciate you guys coming down and reminding us what an asset we have.
We'd love to have you back. And what was fun about the dance performance is it turned out it was Pirate Pub Crawl night. And so there were 3,000 people out on the lawn and 1,500 of them with pirate costumes.
Sober.
It was an eclectic evening.
And the weather helped. I mean, basically cooperated.
Yeah, thank you.
We'd love to offer a tour to assembly members that haven't been there recently.
I haven't been there recently, so.
It's a good idea. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for coming, and thanks for the presentation and for all the good work you do. It's an amazing asset for our city, and I wasn't aware of some of the statistics that you had quoted when you were first starting the presentation. But my question is, you're planning a 25,000 square foot expansion. Are you going up? Are you going to have to acquire some land next door?
So it would not add on to our footprint. It does extend a few feet closer to the sidewalk, but it's an addition. There's a one-story part of the building that is occupies right now our workshops and our loading dock and part of the Imaginary Discovery Center. So it would be adding a second floor to that one-story part of the building. So it would occupy part of 6th Avenue and A Street part of the building, which would be the northeast corner.
Great.
Anything else, Mr. Peterson?
That's it.
Mr. Evans, sir?
Thank you for the presentation. I didn't grow up in Anchorage, so I didn't have the experience of going there as a kid or being married there or anything like that. I did grow up in Cleveland, though, and we did the same thing there with the kids at school would go to museums. And Cleveland has some world-class museums, so I was exposed at an early age to what a quality museum should be. And in coming to Anchorage in the 90s, when I first went to the museum, it was okay. It was like, yeah, coming from Cleveland, I wasn't that impressed with it. It was an average museum, about what I would expect. But I have to admit that in the last several years, it has really turned into a showpiece. You can be proud when you bring family and friends from outside into Anchorage and take them there. It really stands out. It's more than I think people expect in Anchorage, and I think you've done a good job.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Dombowski?
I'm always the pain in the group. Just preface my comments.
And you want me to jump over you and get to Julia?
I do have legal counsel sitting next to me because we've had similar conversation. But I'll start my conversation by saying this. I personally have been to the museum probably 7 times in the last year. Whenever I travel abroad or anywhere, I don't care if it's to Seward, I go to the museum. That's the number one must. I look to see where's the best places to eat. But then I always say, where's the museum? So everywhere I go, and that's how I raise my kids, is we always go because, one of my degrees is history. I love history. And I am incredibly impressed by this museum. And I've lived in England, I've lived in Japan. It's really something I think all Anchorage residents can be proud of. But now let's get to business. So after deductions, specifically the MOA contract administrator fee and the MOA administration, just so we're incredibly clear, the amount municipality contributed to the museum was $4,991,994.30. So with that said, the challenge I had, and it came from originally from not even constituents of mine, but people within Anchorage that were concerned that they couldn't attend board meetings of the museum, considering that the taxpayers in this community are giving the museum nearly $5 million a year to operate. So public process, as I would probably venture a guess or state, I think I'd be accurate in saying this, when it comes issue I think needs to be addressed, and I think as an assembly member, when I was taken back, to be honest with you, when I sent the request to attend the next meeting, and I was basically told it's not open to the public. And I can tell you that's the problem. So that's something that I wanted to have this open and candid conversation so we can start to correct it, because I didn't get one comment from the public about the museum and board meetings. I got multiple. And I don't know where they're coming from, to be honest with you. I couldn't tell you. I'm not sure if people had coffee and said we're all going to complain in the same 2-month period. I'm not sure where that's coming from. But I think in an effort to just highlight incredibly how well, you're saying this operation is run and how well we perceive it to be run, I think it's a great opportunity. And I think it's a lost opportunity when we don't embrace that. But specifically, I want to talk a little bit too about the construction. So can you clarify for me, when we're talking about, when I was reading the contract, and I have to tell you, it's been, I breezed through it pretty quickly recently, but when we're talking about maintenance and everything, the municipality basically has to check off. But now you're talking about a major construction expansion project, and you're talking about the municipality accepting it after. So tell me about that, because we're talking about a municipal facility that we could potentially be doing a significant expansion for, and then the municipality basically has to accept it, right? So what process is there? And you said the mayor would be involved, but we are the branch that essentially appropriates the money. We have the power first. So what involvement do you anticipate the Anchorage Assembly having in that process? And can you just speak to anything I said?
Sure.
Anything, just take a stab.
Sure. And I'll address the public meetings and say that we would love to have any assembly member come and talk to our board. It would be great to have all of you or any of you come there and have a conversation. So please feel welcome at any time. I can speak to the contract, I can speak to IRS regulations regarding 501c3s, and I'll speak to those, but please understand that that does not mean I'm closing ourselves to a conversation, because I'm always happy to have one, as is the board, about how we might go forward. Our contract with the municipality specifies the ways in which the AMA needs to be public. That is that the mayor, and those public checks and balances include the public serving on the board, that the mayor can appoint an ex officio member to the board, so that there's that public checks and balances with the muni on the board.
But you said that's never happened?
That has never happened. That the assembly reviews our audited financials. That the assembly approved the ordinance which set up this public-private partnership, and that the assembly approves any amendments to that contract, some of which have included moving major maintenance over to the responsibility of the AMA, for instance, rather than simply day-to-day maintenance. The contract does specify that the AMA needs to manage, because it's responsible for those costs, that it does need to manage those projects and be responsible to those. And then the IRS regulations on 501c3s specifies that because nonprofit corporations are responsible to municipalities in this case, but also private donors, and also has to operate as a business, that the IRS put protections in place for nonprofits in terms of public meetings, because there is private business interests and private donor information that goes through 501c3s. So that's our understanding, and that part of how the public can access the business of the board is that we do turn in all of our, submit all of our policies, any changes to policies, our minutes of board meetings to the municipal contract administrator, so that there is public access to those as with any public information. So my understanding is the public can go to the contract administrator and request to see those. So there is the transparency in that regard. The expansion, our conversation was with the Sullivan administration initially, where We approached them when Ed Rasmussen talked about making this gift and had a long discussion with the city manager, George Michaelis, with Larry Baker, with Dan Sullivan, and the contract administrator to ask about the process for this expansion. And the discussion was that this should be managed similarly to the Denina Center, as I mentioned, that the city saw it as in their best interest to not have an obligation to the construction of the building, to have the AMA take on that liability and that cost, and so that the municipality would not have any risk in that project. And because it was private dollars, the municipality did not want to take that on. So our understanding was that at the close of that and any cost overruns, anything would be the responsibility of the AMA. And at the point at which the building was completed, that there would be an agreement with the municipality to accept that gift. And we had conversations with the legal department and others to look for a model for that based off the Denina Center. And then we have had conversations with the new administration about managing that project and how that will work. We've had lots of conversations with permitting departments and others, and we have a meeting set for next week. So it could be that the new administration has another way to look at this, and which is part of why we have entered into no construction contracts for the building, so that we can make sure that we're working well with the municipality and the assembly. The assembly would certainly approve or vote on or have the ability to reject any gift to the municipality or any obligation that would be incurred. The Sullivan administration's feeling was that since it was purely privately funded and since the AMA had an ongoing obligation to care for that building, that it was a city asset that it was getting at no cost, and that the benefit would be to accept that when the risk had been eliminated.
Amy, Mr. Flynn's, let me just go to Mr. Flynn, I'll come back to you.
It's on the same
Mr.
topic,
Flynn.
Amy, so,
Thank you.
sorry. Yeah, thank you for coming.
Thanks for being here.
Ms. Decker, just want to make sure I'm clear on this. Ongoing operations and maintenance, and any maintenance, major or minor, of the new space would remain the responsibility of the AMA, even though it's a municipal asset.
Correct.
Okay. And is there an anticipation that the museum would ask for an increment in municipal funding in order to operate it? Or is the anticipation that those funds will be raised privately?
Our anticipation is that we would consider a request for additional operating dollars, but that considering the economic climate, that would probably not receive a favorable reaction. And so our planning in place is to privately fundraise through our endowment to cover the additional increased operating costs of our building.
Thank you.
Mr. Bowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up on the construction part of it. So as I was reading the contract, it was saying that AMA has to follow Title 36, so state procurement code. So I'm certain this is competitively bid.
Mm-hmm. Well, so we do follow our policies. We follow procurement, muni procurement policies, and everything we do. It's part of our financial policies.
So muni procurement. So the bid for this goes out for public solicitation and the whole nine yards. Okay. I had another question. I forgot it. I'll let it come back to me. My mind just went blank.
Mr. Steele, sir.
Yeah, before that goes out, I presume there'll be some touch with the municipality in terms of, at least so that the administration knows what you're doing and how it's going to look. It just seems to me that at least if it's formal, that's one thing. If it's informal, that's another. But it seems to me that the city might have a perspective that would be worth thinking about.
Absolutely. We stay in close contact with the administration. We understand that needs to be a mutual working relationship, that our responsibility is to make sure we are helping the municipality fulfill its obligations and that we are following the policies set forth by the muni. Those are regular conversations at every level of the municipality, from permitting all the way up to the mayor's office. Yes, we do think
Let's
it's
say
very much a
word of
responsibility.
mouth can market the program.
Yeah.
Ms. Gray Jackson and Ms.
Thank
Dombrowski
you, Mr.
again.
Chairman. Even though the museum is a 501c3, it's still a municipal entity and owned by the municipality. And for me, I think it's really important that board meetings be advertised just like any other public meeting. So I guess my question is there an IRS prohibition against the public attending the board meetings?
I don't think the IRS goes to that level.
Okay.
It's just that those regulations were set up with the understanding that that would not be a federal requirement for 501c3s, that the requirement is that the 990s need to be public, that the audit is a public document, but that since the 501c3s need to protect private donor interests as well as business interests, that would not be a legal requirement of 501c3s.
Okay, because that is the biggest thing that concerns me, all right? And I don't know if ACDA, if their board meetings are public or PAC, but for me, not just the museum, but any municipal-owned facility, their board meetings need to be public. And I doubt if anybody will really show up, but still, they need to have that opportunity. And you did mention that the minutes are available through the contractor, but I think it would be a good idea, because most people won't even know that. If somebody wants, they don't know where to find them, so I think it'd be a good idea to maybe put that on the website, that the minutes of board meetings are available through the municipal contractor. And a contact number. I just think that that's really important in terms of the public process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Dombrowski.
Thank you. And just to follow up, so I recognized for a while, I didn't know how long, but obviously forever, that there was no ex officio member from the municipality appointed to that board. And I have thought for Mr. Trini and I have had many discussions about this. I think assembly members should be on that board. I'm glad if there's also a member of the administration. They're non-voting, if they're ex officio. But you have somebody from administration, and you have the legislative body that's essentially kind of like we have the enterprise committee. We watch and see and make sure that we can work together in an efficient manner and make sure the tax dollars that are being appropriated to the entity are essentially being appropriated and used wisely. So I think it's a good thing.
If it's also Ms. Dombrowski, the chair of the assembly is automatically an ex officio member of the Anchorage Museum Foundation Board.
Where's that?
And I know at least one chair.
I used to do that. I used to do it when I was chairman the last time I was on with Mrs. Rasmussen for a long time. Used to come there to the meetings.
That's right. There are also, I should mention, municipal representatives on our facilities committee, so that all of our day-to-day operational decisions,
We'll talk
our
later about
deferred
this.
maintenance projects, and our capital projects have community representation as
Can
well.
I ask a question?
And then the other thing I would
Put
say
you on the
is
list.
dovetail on kind of what Ms. Gray Jackson was saying. So, though we recognize specific foundational parameters for 501c3s, there's no limitations or prohibitions on engaging or having meetings in public. Some of these things can be addressed similar to what we do with labor contracts and bargaining guidelines with a contract. Essentially, the assembly by resolution can signal to the administration, hey, listen, these are the areas that we could look at your contract and we think could be clarified or improved. And until those things are addressed, the Anchorage Assembly can choose not to fund, So those are the conversations. That's why I say there's ways we can clarify this, but I think we can clarify it productively together. If we recognize that people are saying, this is a problem, if we're giving $5 million to municipal entity, that we can't attend their meetings, or there's concern, and I like what you're saying about the construction contract being vetted. I think I would have to think about it more, but on its face value, it sounds to me like it would just be a more productive way to do construction. Get away from some of the red tape and then accept it later. But it does give me a little bit of pause to know that we have a very large municipal building that potentially could be expanded in significant fashion. And as Mr. Flynn pointed out, the potential is there to have to increase the operating contributions to the municipality too, or the contributions to the municipality. So they're all, just checks and balances we need to talk about. And I think
Evans, and I'll come back to you in a second. Mr. Evans? Okay, Ms. Decker.
I just, on behalf of a donor, just wanted to recognize that a $24 million gift is an incredible gift, and it is a major asset that comes to the municipality at no cost and no risk. So while I do understand public process is critical in this process, including that one, I just want to, for the sake of Ed Rasmussen, recognize what a gift that is to this community.
Thank you. Mr. Evans?
Yeah,
I'm coming back to
to
you.
the extent that a $24 million gift is a
That
big
neck
problem
down.
for us and how we deal with it, I hope we have more problems like this. I do want to say, not necessarily the press in the room, so I feel comfortable saying that, I'm not as big a believer in transparency as others. I think it's a somewhat overrated concept that gets overused a lot when we're talking about public process. I think the ultimate thing is transparency. I don't think it is, and I certainly wouldn't want to go down the path that anytime the municipality provides any funds to any organization, it opens up that organization to have public board meetings. I think there is some advantage in having board meetings that aren't public, as long as the outcomes of those board meetings are made public. So while I would be glad to discuss that issue and debate it, I just don't think that automatically saying that putting public into your board meetings is necessarily a better process or a better product. I just be very careful about that.
Mr. Evans. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Evans, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I just want to say, outside 3 o'clock. So, no, I really.
That's all right. I'm going outside till 2 o'clock. So go get your running shoes on.
I appreciate your comments. I really do. But when it comes to nonprofits, 501c3s that the community doesn't own, they have the right to not allow the public to attend their meetings, okay? But for me, when it comes to a 501c3 that the municipality owns, kind of a different story. And
We don't own
Which means the building.
We contribute the money.
we own the municipality, I mean the museum, Mr. Flynn.
We got
But
4
anyway,
minutes yet.
Anyway, and let me just say this, okay? Even if you do advertise the meetings, make them public, okay? You always have the option, in terms of protecting the donors, to go into executive session. So think about that, okay? I mean, you have that option. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything else? We got 3 minutes left.
I was just, when I was in queue.
I'm sorry, Amy. Go ahead, ma'am.
She just said what I was going to say. I mean, what it comes down to, especially when you're concerned about, the privacy of the donors and things of that nature, it's very easy to structure your agenda in such a way where those are the types of issues that are discussed in executive session. And the other thing, I would just say, transparency is a big issue for me, especially when you give $5 million a year for the operation of the museum. So, but like I said, there's not a huge crevasse across here. I think we can do it, and we can do it where everybody. I think we could. I've read the contract. Like I said, maybe not as detailed as it should have, but it's not really the best contract I've ever read. So let's just start there.
Any other questions from assembly members?
The contract and its 3 amendments, let me know.
Yeah.
Julie, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. Thanks for
And I
listening.
think maybe next year we'll see you back again, because it's been a long time since we talked
Next
to
time
you
we'd love to
guys.
host you at the museum.
That would be fine.
Mr. Trainee,
Ma'am?
myself and Assembly Council, we only had the first 2 amendments. I don't have the 3rd amendment to the contract.
Happy to provide the 3rd amendment if it's helpful.
Thanks. Might just address all the issues.
This work session's over. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.